I'm glad that you did. If you grab one of these brochures, ladies and gentlemen, you'll see along the top line of the Pacific Islands Regional Agency, SPREP, the Environment Agency, was mentioned as one. And down the bottom line, supporting them all, are three agencies. This is not a closed list. My agency, Conservation International, IUCN, and UNEP. In fact, UNEP has been extremely active in the design of and implementation of the Oceanscape to date. In terms of expanding it across the Pacific Ocean, I'm for that, but I'm planning to hand over to IUCN and to HOLO for the 2020. The goal of the Oceanscape was to help organise this group of countries to stand united so that they could better engage at whole ocean basin level the wider Pacific Ocean community. And there is a really good design of initiative called Pacific Ocean 2020, and I hope that the Pacific Oceanscape is a strong commitment to that.
Thanks, Sue. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Russ Mittermeier, president of Conservation International, and I work in rainforests. And for a long time, we kind of looked down on the marine realm and how backwards it was in terms of conservation, less than 1% covered, and so on and so forth. Now we're really jealous because you've become so successful, and what you're doing in the Pacific Oceanscape is just off the charts in terms of its historical value. It's really unbelievable. There's never been anything like this in the history of the conservation movement. And even though I've been following it since the beginning, along with Sue and Greg Stone, yourself, and others, I continue to be amazed at what's being accomplished. And we were kind of hoping when President Tong declared the Phoenix Islands protected area and Tami Rangantsu declared the Micronesia Challenge back in, I guess it was 2006, that there would be follow-up by other Pacific Island nations. And the news that we just heard is phenomenal. Now we have to get the American government to also do something in its territories out there in the region as well. But this is just amazing, and I hope that everyone comes out of this this Congress fully appreciating what's been accomplished here. And you need to give me some of those slides so I can use them in my presentations tomorrow night.
I'd just like to add to Russ's comments though. Auntie Hillary is a very good friend of the Pacific Oceanscape right now. She committed whole of US government position to support the Pacific Oceanscape, plus she committed their Pacific Remote Islands National Monument into the Phoenix Ocean Arc, and we hope the Line Islands Ocean Arc. So we're certainly very grateful to the US government. And Auntie Hillary left Rara with a big smile on her face.
Yes, ma'am. And then I saw another hand over here.
Kath Wallace from the Environment and Conservation Organisations of New Zealand. But I'm also tied up with, and DECO is tied up with the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition and the Antarctic Oceans Alliance. And I wanted to both congratulate you on what you variously have achieved, but also suggest that we need to lift our ambition to include a really close cooperation, if you like, between and recognition of the interactions between the Southern Ocean around Antarctica and the Pacific. And I suggest that everyone in Oceania needs to pay attention to what's happening in the Southern Ocean. We've just come from New Zealand and have just heard that increasingly conservation backward government has turned down a US proposal which we thought wasn't ambitious enough for protection of the Ross Sea, which is perhaps, as a filmmaker has called it, the last ocean. We would really appreciate help from everyone in this room and all your networks to put pressure on the New Zealand government to get more protection for the Ross Sea, and indeed to coalesce with each other to get a network of 19 protected areas in the Southern Ocean. We, of course, are also working on some aspects of Pacific things. We've tried to get some more environmental things into the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organisation, and indeed to get that to be an environmental management, not just a ghetto of fisheries management, but I guess we would like to be part of some of these conversations, if only to learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Alistair Gamble from Kew Environment Group, but from London, Washington. Two things. Firstly, you actually put a red line in one of your slides around Pitcairn, which is very exciting, but a bit premature. So please don't spread that too widely, partially because the Pitcairners themselves haven't decided to do that. So seriously, we hope that they will, but not yet, so to speak. So the other thing I wanted to raise, I think it's all very exciting. All of these announcements are very exciting, but the question is how protected are our protected areas, and we must be careful not to devalue the currency. I have seen maps which show the whole of the EEZ of New Zealand as a protected area on the basis that there is no bottom fishing, and the governments are not above taking the praise and cutting the effort. It's very exciting, but let's actually see and delineate and carefully consider actually what is happening on the ground, some of which will be really excellent, but sadly I suspect some of it might not be. But I hope I'm wrong on the second part.
Thank you. John, do you have the list, the queued list here? Is it? I believe, ma'am, you're.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on the point about New Zealand, and I certainly don't want to sidetrack this conversation onto New Zealand, but I very much endorse the point that Alistair just made, because part of New Zealand's strategy is to debase the currency of protection, particularly marine protection. The government and the fishing industry are trying to argue that anything that's got any fisheries regulation is a protected area. But they also invented what they call benefit protected areas, but which we call bogus protected areas. It has the same acronym, which is the fishing industry decided on some areas that were 30% of the EEZ that they would declare with the help of the Minister of Fisheries to be benefit protected areas. This was protection against just bottom fishing, not any other kinds of fishing. It certainly doesn't protect against mining, and we almost immediately had mining applications over some of the areas that had been declared part of the benefit protected areas. So yes, this question of size matters, absolutely right, but quality and enforcement and the significance of the biodiversity protection and the ecosystem function protection are absolutely critical as well. And as long as we just talk about areas and percentages, we leave ourselves open to this kind of debasement of the currency. Just on the question of surveillance and enforcement, I was just turning over in my mind whether somebody like Richard Branson, who's got a sort of aeronautical connection, could be encouraged to provide funding for, satellite surveillance or something like that, to get some private sector, which I don't always appreciate the private sector when they come wanting to mine, for instance. But, maybe some of these super rich people who have grandiose ideas might be attracted by providing some swish hardware to some of these things.
Thank you.
I could just make a quick comment to both of those points. And it's really nice to see both Alistair and Kath in the audience. And Kath is a seventh generation Kiwi. I live in hope about the Kumadex, but we're still waiting. These large areas, I think, should be seen as a wake-up call. They're a wake-up call in communities in our region, include local people, not just governments, to manage and know about the EEZ. Right now, if you downloaded the Cook Island News, top news right now is about where fishing boats are and what they're doing. For too long in these EEZs, and even worse in the high seas, we've let the users go in without any justification or very limited checks and balances. I think the role of these large marine park or marine protected areas is to change that paradigm, is to change it to one of where protection is a common sense insurance policy and is part of your core business. How much protection has to be worked out through marine spatial planning, and this is the journey that these sites are on. But in discussions in New Caledonia and in Kiribati and in Cook Islands, and more widely, at the core of this is significant no-take zones, or whatever you want to call it, core protection. This piece, or the jewels in the crown, some people like to call it, need to be part of the normal way we manage our EEZs. Will 1.4 million square kilometres of New Caledonia be no-take zone? I highly doubt it. Will a very large area of it be no-take zone? I fully expect it.
Thanks, Sue. What do you think, John? We got a few more minutes for questions. Anyone in the back? We've got a forward bias here. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark Spalding of the Nature Conservancy in Cambridge University. So I'm intrigued and interested by this idea of debasing the currency, and I think it's a real problem. It's a real problem with IUCN actually. I've just done a new analysis of the world's marine protected areas, and those sites are in there for New Zealand because they've been approved by the Royal Commission on Protected Areas as meeting IUCN's definition. I'm just telling you that as a fact. So that needs to be. I know there's a hot debate going on.
Tells us endlessly
well,
that
I'm just, that it's an issue across all the world. There's 10,000 marine protected areas in the world, and it's a huge challenge. But another point, and I think Alice will probably want to respond to this, but the Chagos MPA, which is in there in this network, was one that I objected to. Strangely enough, because I think when we think about partnerships, I objected to it because the Chagosian people and the Mauritians who were claimants of Chagos weren't consulted at all when it was set up. And so another form of debasing the currency perhaps is not having a full consultation and a full network involved. And I think that's quite an important part to remember. The Chagos MPA has been challenged by two separate legal challenges at the moment, and they failed because of that failure to network with all the right stakeholders. I hope it doesn't fail, and I think efforts are now being made to bring in the Chagosians. So hopefully things can be patched up, but that's a way I would say not to go in terms of networking. You've got to bring in all the stakeholders right from the start.
Thanks very much, Mark. I think we've got time. That was a great comment. Yes, we got time for a few more.
Mark and I often spar on this, just to put the record straight. There was a consultation, and the Chagosians were consulted. Some of them certainly disagreed with the designation either, but let's not differentiate the disagreement of some people with the actual consultation. I think that's an important point to make. And the Chagos situation is a rather peculiar situation, which I won't go into here, but has a certain amount of history which has nothing to do with the protected area attached to it.
Thanks, Alistair. If anyone wants an interesting pint of beer, Alistair's got fabulous stories around this subject. I think we got Randy, and then we've got two more, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap.
You want me to go back?
Or you can, Randy, you're a professor, so you can project.
I can't sing, but I can.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay.
Very appropriate. Right at the front of the class.
So I think one challenge, and it was brought up in our locally managed marine areas network today, and that is how we re-engage local people after the very large areas are established. The example given was the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, and we had Aboriginal representatives there saying, well, this is absolutely wonderful and that's good, but it's wonderful because they are now being re-engaged and feeling, if you might call it retrospective ownership of it. But I think this is a real challenge in big things like that, because a lot of governments do this, and if you go at the village level, no one really knows what it is. And there's two aspects of that ownership. One is the fact that they really are part of the decision-making process, but the second part is that we really need much, much greater awareness raising about the kind of things that if you do this, what are the gains we get against climate change and that, and share that in local languages with people, because then they can talk about how Kiribati is the champion. So all the people of Kiribati, I'm not saying that's not being done, but that's a real area of opportunity to really bring this thing together.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Jan Steffen from the IUCN regional office in the Oceania region. A very brief point in regard to this very valid issue of debasing the currency. I think it should caution us, and it's a point well taken, but at the same time I would like to want us all to reflect on the history, for example, of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. There are people here who know much better than I do with how many percent no-take the GBR started. If I'm not mistaken, it was 5 or 6%.
It's
Definitely not more.
actually zero.
It
took about 5 years to get to 5.
Exactly, and basically what allowed the process to take place that makes now Australia proud in the sense that it is more than 30% is that there was time for that process. And I think that is time that we should give countries like the Cook Islands, like the Phoenix Islands. So yes, we should have a careful eye, but on the other hand, we should definitely give countries the time they need to change their paradigms and to look in a more holistic way.
Thank you very much, John. John, do you have a bit?
Last comment.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know the details of what happened with Chagos, but I'm sure that in the Pacific there was full consultation beforehand. And I think it's really important that we not throw any kind of a wet blanket on these accomplishments that have taken place. This has been an amazing effort that I think is going to go down in history as one of the greatest accomplishments in conservation. I think it's going to grow. I very much like the idea of somehow trying to leverage more action on behalf of Antarctica. We've talked a lot about Antarctica, but we actually haven't done that much. We need to do a lot more. But I think that this is so important that these countries, and let's face it, the land area of the countries that have made these commitments, with the exception of New Caledonia, you could probably squeeze onto the island of Jeju. But the marine areas, Kiribati is 3.5 million square kilometers. That's almost half the size of the United States. The 40 million square kilometers of the Pacific Oceanscape is 4 times the United States, more than 4 times. This is phenomenal stuff. And let's recognize it, let's applaud it, let's have some kind of statement come out of this Congress congratulating these Pacific Island nations for what they've done, because it is really something that is unprecedented in the history of conservation. So, and I hope we should draft something. I think so far all the news that we've seen coming out of this meeting is about the port problems here. I'd like to see some really good news coming out, and this is about the best good news I think we have right now to get out there. So let's talk about how we can get this out through the media as well.
Thank you. Well, just off of that, maybe sort of thinking on the fly, we could offer, a group of those who would like to be a part of that drafting to just stay after, and we can set up a time to do that. Final comment?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Christophe Lefebvre from the Council, IUCN Council, in charge of the ocean. So.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if we can enlarge the discussion, because this initiative, congratulations, is very on the global challenge of protecting the ocean. I think this initiative is really efficient and very... the question, in fact, should be, if we have time to discuss on this objective, how could we replicate this kind of initiative in the other oceans, in the Indian Oceans, where there are a lot of needs of protection and a lot of initiatives should be taken, and why not in the Atlantic Ocean? So I think we should pay attention to this kind of initiative in the other ocean, and why not to have a reflection for maybe the big ocean becoming the big 5 oceans. So, and my last question is, well, according to the World Bank initiative on the Global Ocean Partnership, how can we make link between the World Bank initiative and what we have done in the Pacific, and how can we push a global challenge with this oceanscape concept?
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci.
Yeah, John, I just want to quickly point out that there's a West Indian Ocean Challenge, which is spurred from, all these other Pacific movements, and there's also the Caribbean Challenge, which is in the Atlantic. So these are starting to move, and we can build on those. So, thank you.
But really, this is exactly why we wanted to have this discussion period, is because we knew that it's one thing to present, it's another thing to listen and to hear each other. And although our time is limited today, we certainly have a few more days while we're all here together that we could certainly, in an organic manner, come together and discuss some of these topics. This evening, I'm going to go ahead and type all of this up. My plan is to post it on the IUCN website. Anyone that would like me to email these notes, please come see me afterwards and give me your email. I'll send it to you tonight. And maybe we could talk about possibly, as Dr. Mittermeier suggested, a possibility of coming together after the session is over and setting a time to continue the discussion. So, okay, well, I'd like to just first recognize and thank all of the plenary opinions, and just give them a warm round of applause.